find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls." The words pierced through the noise of Belmont's, one of Seattle's most prestigious restaurants. Victoria's voice was sharp, cutting through the air with the precision of someone used to getting their way. Her laughter echoed around the table, and my parents, my brother Kenneth and Victoria's husband, all joined in as though it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I stood frozen, clutching my clutch, my face flushed with humiliation as the attention of nearby diners shifted toward me. I could feel my heart racing, the warmth of the chandeliers above contrasting with the cold emptiness inside me. I was 27 years old, and for as long as I could remember, I had been the adopted daughter, the outsider. My name is Rachel, and I've lived with this family for 22 years, since they adopted me when I was 5. Despite the years that had passed, I never stopped feeling like I didn't belong, like I was different. The only person who ever made me feel like I mattered was Grandma Dorothy, my adoptive mother's mother, who was sitting at the far end of the table, her eyes focused on me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my sister Victoria's words hit me harder than I could have anticipated. "Victoria, that's enough," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to maintain some semblance of dignity. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," my mother, Patricia, chimed in, waving her hand dismissively. "We're just teasing. You know how Victoria is." I did know how Victoria was. At 32, she had perfected the art of making me feel small while maintaining the appearance of family unity. Growing up, she got the best of everything. The nicest bedroom, the newest clothes, the fancy college education. I got hand-me-downs and a community college education. She was celebrated for mediocrity while I was criticized for excellence. "Sit down, Rachel," my father, Gregory, ordered, his voice carrying a tone of finality. I sat, swallowing my protest. I could feel the familiar numbness setting in, the familiar role I played in the family, the outsider, the one who never truly belonged. Then the waiter approached with the check. My stomach sank as he placed the leather folder in front of me. "What's this?" I asked, confusion lacing my voice. Victoria's laughter cut through the tension like a knife. "Oh, didn't we tell you? You're paying tonight. Consider it your contribution to the family, since you're always taking but never giving." I couldn't afford this. I had been struggling to keep my business afloat, scraping by. The $50,000 contract wasn't mine to spend. It was going straight toward business expenses, student loans, and bills. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't make another scene. I just couldn't. So, with trembling hands, I handed over my credit card. The waiter whisked it away, and I forced myself to smile, pretending it didn't hurt. Victoria continued talking about her upcoming vacation to Tuscany. My parents were planning to join her. No one asked if I wanted to come. No one ever did. In this family, Rachel is the outsider, always overlooked and humiliated. But tonight, something shifts and the truth might finally be exposed. I tried to keep my focus as the dinner dragged on, but with each passing moment, the reality of what had just happened, the humiliation, the dismissal, the disregard, settled deeper into my bones. Victoria, Kenneth, my parents, they were all so wrapped up in their own little world, a world where I didn't exist, or at least didn't matter. As I sat there, silently stewing in my frustration, I noticed Grandma Dorothy. She was sitting at the far end of the table, quietly observing. She hadn't spoken much all evening, but there was something different about the way she was looking at me, something sharp, calculating, like she was taking in every moment. Grandma Dorothy was different from the rest of the family. While my parents and siblings treated me as an obligation, she had always treated me like I mattered.
She had been there for me in ways no one else had, showing up at my school plays, remembering my birthday, asking about my dreams. I had always felt a deep sense of connection to her, something I'd never experienced with anyone else in my family. But tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Grandma Dorothy wasn't the type to sit quietly when injustice was happening, and I could feel her gaze on me, steady and sure. She had seen the way they treated me, the way they pushed me aside, and I wondered if she was about to do something about it. The silence around the table grew, and just as I felt like I might suffocate from the weight of everything, Grandma Dorothy stood up. The room fell silent. Even Victoria stopped mid-sentence, and the conversation ceased abruptly. All eyes turned toward her. It was as if the world itself had come to a standstill. "Enough," she said, her voice calm but firm. There was an authority in her words that made even my father sit straighter in his chair. "Grandma?" Patricia started, but Grandma Dorothy silenced her with a raised hand. "I've been watching this family for a long time, and I've seen how you treat Rachel, how you've always treated her." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. My father, Gregory, exchanged a nervous glance with my mother. Kenneth had put down his phone, and Victoria's smug expression was replaced with confusion. Everyone at the table seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for what Grandma Dorothy would say next. "You've seen you mock her, belittle her, make her feel like she's less than human. And tonight, you made her pay for your excesses while you laughed about it." The words hit like thunderclap, shattering the tense air in the room. I felt my pulse quicken as the weight of her words sank in. Grandma Dorothy had always been the one to speak up for me, the one who made me feel like I wasn't crazy for feeling overlooked, for feeling less than. Victoria's face was flushed with anger now, but she couldn't muster a response. Kenneth and my parents sat frozen like they'd just been slapped in the face. "You think this is all a joke, but it's not," Grandma Dorothy said, her eyes locking on each of them. "For years, you've taken everything from Rachel, and now you've crossed a line." The room was still. The only sound was the soft clink of silverware on plates, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Grandma Dorothy walked slowly around the table, her gaze never leaving the family members who had so casually destroyed me over the years. Then she stopped beside me. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder, and she leaned down close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. "Rachel," she said softly, "you've been through so much. You've worked harder than anyone at this table, and it's time the world knew what you've really accomplished. You've earned this." And with those words, something inside me snapped into place. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. For the first time, I wasn't just Rachel, the outsider, the adopted child who didn't belong. I was Rachel, someone who mattered, someone who had a future. The weight of what Grandma Dorothy had just said was too much to process in the moment. My mind raced with thoughts, emotions, and questions I couldn't quite grasp. But one thing was clear. This dinner, this moment, had changed everything. Grandma Dorothy's unexpected stand for Rachel has shifted the family dynamic. With her support, Rachel is finally seen for who she truly is, and the power is about to shift in ways no one expected.
The air around the table crackled with tension, but no one dared to speak. Victoria's face had gone pale, her hands clenched into fists under the table. She looked like a child who had just had her favorite toy taken away. My parents were silent too, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and something darker, fear. Grandma Dorothy's words had cut through their carefully constructed world of control and superiority. For the first time in as long as I could remember, the tables had turned. My family, who had always made me feel invisible, now saw me in a way they never had before.
And it wasn't out of kindness. It was out of necessity. I had become the person they could no longer ignore. "Are you seriously doing this, Mother?" My mother's voice trembled with disbelief. "You're disinheriting all of us for Rachel? She's just a charity case you picked up years ago. You can't honestly think she deserves everything you've worked for?" The words stung, but they were nothing new. They were just the same cruel dismissal I had been getting from them all my life, packaged in a new form. They had never seen me as part of their family. I had always been the outsider, the one who didn't quite belong. Grandma Dorothy wasn't finished. "You've all failed Rachel," she said, her voice unwavering. "I've spent years watching how you treat her, how you've always treated her. And tonight, you made her pay for your excesses. The truth is, Rachel has earned everything she's gotten. She's worked hard for everything she has. You have taken, belittled, and mocked her, and now you'll face the consequences of your actions." The silence that followed was suffocating. My family, once so sure of their place in the world, was now floundering, unable to comprehend what had just happened. But me? For the first time in my life, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt before: strength. I had never been the one to speak up, never had the courage to stand up for myself. But Grandma Dorothy's support gave me the strength I needed. In that moment, I knew I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. The world was changing, and I was going to take my place in it. As the waiter came around with the check, Grandma Dorothy's words echoed in my mind. I hadn't asked for this inheritance. I hadn't expected it. But now I understood that this wasn't just about money. It was about something bigger. It was about respect, about recognition. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Victoria opened her mouth to protest again, but this time it was Grandma Dorothy who cut her off. "I'm changing my will, and everything is going to Rachel," she said, her voice final. There was no turning back now. My family's world was shattering around them, and I was the one who would stand in the center of it all, ready to take control of my own future.
After Grandma Dorothy's declaration, the atmosphere in the room grew thick with unspoken words, tension, and disbelief. Victoria, who had always been the loudest voice at family gatherings, was silent now. Her hands were trembling, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and shock. My parents were still in a state of stunned silence, struggling to process the enormity of what had just happened. But Grandma Dorothy wasn't fazed. She had always been the one to act with conviction, to speak with authority. She had seen the ugly side of my family, the side I had grown used to, and now she was going to ensure that everything was righted. "I've had enough of watching you all treat Rachel like she's less than," Grandma Dorothy said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "I'm not just giving her my wealth because she's my granddaughter. I'm giving it to her because she's the only one in this family who has shown true strength and integrity. The rest of you have spent years exploiting her, making her feel small, and now you'll face the consequences." My mother's face twisted in anger. "You can't be serious. You can't just throw us aside for her. We're your blood. We've done everything for you." But Grandma Dorothy wasn't backing down. Blood means nothing if it's not backed by love, kindness, and respect. You failed her in every way possible, and now it's time for that to change. Victoria, still trying to regain control, stood up suddenly. Her voice shook with fury. "You're making a huge mistake. This isn't how it works. You can't just leave everything to her."
Grandma Dorothy didn't flinch. I can and I have. It's done. Rachel will inherit everything. And when I'm gone, she will be the one to carry on my legacy. My heart pounded in my chest as I absorbed the full weight of her words. Everything. It was more than I could process in the moment, but there was something powerful in her conviction, something that made me believe, for the first time in my life, that I wasn't just an afterthought in this family. As the conversation turned to a near-combustible argument between Victoria and Grandma Dorothy, I couldn't help but notice the quiet strength in my grandmother's eyes. She had always been the one to see through the superficiality of our family, the one who had always believed in me when no one else did. And now, she was giving me the ultimate gift, the chance to live my life on my terms. "Rachel," Grandma Dorothy said, turning her gaze to me, "you've always had the potential to rise above this, and now you will. The wealth I'm giving you is only a small part of it. The real gift is the freedom to build your own future." I had no words. What could I say? All my life, I had struggled to earn my family's approval. And now, for the first time, I was being given something I hadn't even dared to dream of. A chance to finally live for myself, to build something meaningful from the ground up. But with the gift came responsibility. The family wouldn't go down quietly. Victoria had already started making calls. I could feel it. The battle for the will had just begun, and I was about to be thrust into a fight I hadn't prepared for. But as Grandma Dorothy's hand rested gently on my shoulder, I felt the weight of her trust. She believed in me, and that belief was all I needed. The family's attempt to reclaim what they feel is rightfully theirs will soon collide with Rachel's newfound power, setting the stage for an all-out battle. The days following Grandma Dorothy's declaration were a blur of emotions, uncertainty and preparation. I spent hours with her lawyer, Walter, reviewing documents, discussing the legalities, and understanding the full scope of the responsibility now thrust upon me. The truth was, I had no idea how to manage a fortune this vast, how to navigate the intricate world of corporate empires and multi-million-dollar estates. But Grandma Dorothy's words echoed in my mind, fueling me with the strength I needed. "You have the drive, Rachel," she had told me, her eyes steady and full of purpose. "What you need is the courage to stand firm, to build your future, and to protect it from those who would tear it down." But even as I absorbed her wisdom, the shadows of what was to come loomed large. Victoria, having tasted the bitter sting of losing everything, was not going to back down easily. Her calls to lawyers, her frantic efforts to challenge the will, none of this was surprising. My family had always been accustomed to having power, to getting what they wanted. Losing it was something they couldn't accept. I knew the battle wasn't going to be quick or easy. My family wasn't just going to let go of what they had believed was theirs by birthright. But as I sat at Grandma Dorothy's side, reviewing legal strategies, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was my fight now, and for the first time in my life, I was fighting for something that truly mattered. The first few public attempts to discredit me were already starting. News outlets picked up the story of Grandma Dorothy's new will, and the backlash was immediate. Victoria's lawyer had leaked a story to the press, spinning a narrative that painted me as a gold digger, someone who had manipulated an elderly woman for her fortune. The accusations were outrageous, but the media didn't care. They were hungry for drama, and I was the center of it. But with every rumor, every story that painted me in a bad light, I felt my resolve strengthen. I had nothing to hide. I had built my business from the ground up, working tirelessly to make something of myself despite the way my family had treated me. I wasn't a thief, a manipulator, or a gold digger. I was Rachel, the woman who had survived their cruelty, who had finally found a way to stand up for herself. Grandma Dorothy's health, which had been rapidly declining, only added to the pressure. She was growing weaker by the day, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. The cancer had taken its toll, and there were moments when she was too exhausted to continue the fight, but she refused to let go of her belief in me. Even on her weakest days, she reminded me of my worth, of the strength I had within me to carry her legacy forward. As the days passed, I found myself preparing not just for a legal battle, but for a public one as well. My family was desperate to salvage their image, to paint me as the villain in their story, but I wasn't going to let them. I was ready to face whatever came next. I had survived their cruelty for years. Now it was time to fight for the future I deserved.
The first real blow in the legal fight came within a week. Victoria, refusing to accept her defeat, filed a formal motion to contest the will. Her argument was that Grandma Dorothy had been unduly influenced, that the decision was made under duress due to her illness. The allegations were as baseless as they were cruel, but the legal process had begun, and there was no turning back. Victoria's strategy was clear: discredit me, paint me as the manipulative granddaughter who had preyed on an elderly woman for money. I was no longer just fighting for my inheritance. I was fighting to clear my name, to prove I wasn't the villain in their twisted version of the story. As the media frenzy grew, I found myself in the center of a storm I hadn't anticipated. The headlines became more aggressive. Granddaughter inherits billion-dollar fortune after allegedly manipulating elderly heiress. Did Rachel Hayes steal her inheritance? The questions came fast, furious, and relentless. The public was divided, half of them sympathetic, seeing me as the victim of a cruel family, the other half condemning me as a gold digger. But it wasn't just the media that had turned on me. I'd started to receive strange phone calls, anonymous threats that warned me to back down, to let the family have their way. But I couldn't. Not now, not after everything I had been through. In the midst of the chaos, Grandma Dorothy's health continued to decline. She was still holding on, still fighting for me, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. She had fought for her empire for decades, built it from nothing, and now she was watching the people she had trusted tear each other apart over it. One evening, after a long day of legal meetings, I sat with Grandma Dorothy in her study. The weight of everything, of the media, of the legal battles, of the constant pressure, was starting to feel overwhelming. But she sat there, steady and composed, as always. Her frail hand rested on mine, and for a moment it felt like everything would be okay. "You're doing well, Rachel," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I'm proud of you. I know this fight isn't easy, but you have the strength to win it. Don't let them make you doubt yourself." I looked at her, the woman who had always believed in me, who had always supported me even when no one else did. "I don't know how to do this, Grandma," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I don't know how to fight them. I don't know how to protect what you've worked for." She smiled, a faint, knowing smile. "You already are. Just by standing your ground. You don't need to fight like they do. You just need to be yourself, Rachel. You've already proven who you are, and that's all I've ever asked for." The truth in her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't alone in this fight. I wasn't doing this for the money, for the fame, or for the legacy. I was doing it for myself, for the years I had spent invisible, for the years I had spent trying to prove my worth. And I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me. As the days turned into weeks, the legal battle grew fiercer and the pressure mounted. But I knew now that I couldn't back down. I had something worth fighting for: my future, my dignity, and my grandmother's legacy. With the battle now fully underway, Rachel draws strength from her grandmother's wisdom, ready to face her family's attacks with unwavering resolve.
The battle in the courts was one thing, but the real test was what happened outside the courtroom. The media had already picked up on the story of my inheritance, and with each passing day, the narrative grew more toxic. Victoria had made sure that the media was flooded with her version of events, that I had manipulated Grandma Dorothy, that I had somehow tricked her into giving me everything. The headlines were relentless and the public divided. Some saw me as the victim, others as a ruthless gold digger. It was clear that the media wasn't just a bystander in this fight. They were playing their part, fanning the flames of controversy and scandal. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I needed to take control of the narrative. It was time to stand up and speak my truth. Grandma Dorothy, despite her frailty, was resolute. She knew what had to be done, and she wasn't going to let anyone continue tarnishing my name. "Rachel, it's time," she said one afternoon, her voice quiet but firm. "We have to do this. We have to take the fight to them." I wasn't sure I was ready for a public appearance. The idea of standing in front of a room full of reporters, cameras flashing, all eyes on me was terrifying. But it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about what the world thought of me. It was about the truth. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Grandma Dorothy's office in downtown Seattle. When the time came, I found myself walking into a room filled with reporters, their microphones pointed at me, their cameras flashing. The room buzzed with energy, the air thick with anticipation. Grandma Dorothy sat beside me, her posture straight despite her condition. I could see the toll her illness had taken on her, but there was still an undeniable strength in her eyes. Walter, her lawyer, stood on the other side of the table, ready to field questions from the press. When Grandma Dorothy began to speak, her voice was steady, confident. She said, "Thank you for coming," her gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm here today to address the rumors and allegations surrounding my will and the inheritance I have left to my granddaughter, Rachel." Her words echoed through the room, cutting through the noise and the chaos. She was in control. She was finally telling the world the truth. She went on to detail the years of abuse I had suffered at the hands of my family, the years they had belittled me, ignored me, made me feel less than. She spoke of how I had built my life from nothing, working hard to create something meaningful for myself despite their efforts to undermine me. "And I'm here to tell you," Grandma Dorothy continued, her voice firm and unwavering, "that I chose Rachel not because of pity or because she's my granddaughter, but because she has proven time and time again that she is worthy of everything I have. She's the only one in this family who has shown true strength, true character, and I won't let anyone take that away from her." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was being seen for who I really was, not as the adopted child, not as the outsider, but as someone who had fought for everything I had. When it was time for me to speak, I found that the words came easier than I expected. I stood, feeling the eyes of the entire room on me, and I took a deep breath. "I never asked for this," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves churning inside me. "I never asked for my grandmother's fortune, and I never wanted to be in the middle of a family feud. But what I want, what I've always wanted, is the truth to be known. I have worked my whole life to build something for myself. I have fought through years of being made to feel like I didn't matter, and now I'm finally being given the chance to stand up for myself." I paused, glancing at Grandma Dorothy, who gave me a reassuring nod. "And to those who think I have manipulated her, I say this: I didn't. I have never asked for anything. What my grandmother gave me was a choice to stand up, to build something that honors her legacy, and to fight for what I deserve. What I deserve is the same respect, the same dignity that everyone else in this room is given." The words felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had finally spoken my truth, and the relief that washed over me was unlike anything I had ever felt before. I was done hiding, done playing small, done letting my family dictate who I was. With the press conference behind her, Rachel has taken control of the narrative, standing firm in her truth and preparing for the battle that lies ahead.
The press conference had barely ended when the fallout began. The media storm was relentless. I had spoken my truth, and now it was out there for the world to see. There was no turning back, no erasing the words I had said. The cameras, the reporters, the headlines, they were all now focused on me. And my life had become the subject of public scrutiny in a way I had never imagined. The reactions were divided, as expected. Some people rallied behind me, calling me brave for speaking out, for standing up against a family that had treated me as less than for so many years. Others, however, painted me as a manipulator, a woman who had taken advantage of an elderly relative for personal gain. The media had a narrative, and they weren't about to let the facts get in the way. Victoria's meltdown went viral almost immediately. The footage of her storming out of the press conference shouting accusations at me was broadcast repeatedly. The public couldn't get enough of the drama. Some people sympathized with her, while others saw her for what she truly was, a woman who had lost everything and was now scrambling to protect her reputation. But the backlash from my family is what stung the most. After the press conference, I received dozens of text messages from my mother, father, and brother, each one filled with guilt-tripping, blame, and anger. They had never taken me seriously, and now with my grandmother's will in the public eye, they were desperate to make me the villain. "Rachel," my mother's message began, "you've destroyed everything. You've made us look like monsters. We're your family. You owe us." Another message came in from Kenneth. "This isn't over. You can't just do this to us. We raised you. You're nothing without us." The words stung, but I had heard them all before. They had always been quick to claim their rights to my life, to my success. But when it came time to support me, to see me as an equal, they were nowhere to be found. I spent the next few days hiding away from it all. I didn't check the news, didn't look at my phone. Instead, I spent my time with Grandma Dorothy, who was growing weaker each day. She had always been the one to help me navigate these dark waters, but now it was my turn to take the lead. I had to stay strong, not just for me, but for her. She had placed her trust in me, and I couldn't let her down now. I kept the blinds drawn, trying to block out the noise of the world, but despite my attempts to shield myself, the truth was inescapable. My family was coming for me, and the legal battle was about to get even uglier. The next morning, Walter, Grandma Dorothy's lawyer, called with an urgent update. He said, "They've filed for a full investigation into your background. They're trying to paint you as someone who doesn't deserve this inheritance. They found something they think they can use against you." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What do they have?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're claiming that your business success was influenced by your grandmother's wealth, that she funded it from the beginning. They're trying to prove that you've been manipulating her for years." I could feel the walls closing in around me. This wasn't just a fight for the inheritance anymore. It was a fight for my reputation, for my integrity, my business, my identity. Everything I had worked for was now under attack. But as I sat with Grandma Dorothy later that afternoon, her frail hand resting in mine, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let them define me. I had fought too hard to get where I was, and I wouldn't let my family or their lies take that away from me. "I'll fight them," I said quietly, looking at Grandma Dorothy. "I won't let them win. Not this time." Grandma Dorothy smiled weakly, her eyes shining with pride. "I know you will, sweetheart. You've always been stronger than you know." It was time to take control of my story. It was time to show the world who I truly was. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. Every phone call, every email, every news story seemed to push me closer to the edge. My family, once so united, was now splintering apart under the weight of their desperation. The legal motions had been filed, the accusations were flying, and the media was fueling the flames.
Victoria's legal team had spared no expense in trying to paint me as the villain. They argued that I had manipulated Grandma Dorothy, that I had used my position as her granddaughter to gain access to her fortune. It didn't matter that everything I had built, the business, the clients, the success, had come from my own hard work. The public perception was now in their hands, and they were determined to destroy my reputation. The night before the hearing, I found myself sitting alone in Grandma Dorothy's study, staring at the pile of documents Walter had given me. The weight of everything pressing down on me was overwhelming. The courtroom would be the final battleground. It wasn't just about the will anymore. It was about my entire future. I glanced out the window, watching the dark Seattle sky, my thoughts racing. The road ahead was uncertain. I wasn't sure if I could survive this fight, or if I had the strength to keep going. But I had no choice. I had to fight, not just for the inheritance, but for my dignity, for all the years of silence, all the years of being treated like I didn't matter. This was my moment to show the world that I wasn't just the adopted child. I was someone who had earned everything I had, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom with my head held high. The media was there, as expected, their cameras flashing as they scrambled for the latest angle on the drama. But I didn't look at them. I didn't care what they thought. All that mattered now was the fight that was about to unfold. As I took my seat, I saw my family across the room. Victoria, my mother, my father, and Kenneth. They all looked worn, their faces drawn and tired. But it wasn't their exhaustion that worried me. It was their determination. They were still fighting, still trying to take everything from me. As the judge entered the room, the noise fell to a hush. The proceedings began, and Victoria's lawyer was the first to speak. He argued that Grandma Dorothy had been manipulated, that I had somehow used my position as her granddaughter to convince her to change the will. But they had no proof, nothing substantial. It was all speculation, all designed to destroy my credibility. Then it was our turn. Walter stood up, presenting the truth. He laid out the documents that showed Grandma Dorothy's mental clarity when she changed the will. He spoke of her love for me, her belief in my character, and her decision to leave everything to me not out of guilt or manipulation, but because I had earned it. Rachel Hayes is not here because of manipulation, Walter said firmly. She is here because she has proven herself time and time again to be the only one in this family who deserves the legacy that has been entrusted to her. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as the weight of the moment settled over me. This was it. This was the fight that would determine everything.
The courtroom was charged with tension, each word spoken, each argument made, hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. My family's lawyer was relentless, spinning his narrative with venom, trying to convince the judge that I didn't deserve the inheritance. But the more he spoke, the more I felt my resolve strengthen. I was no longer the silent, overlooked member of the family. I had a voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. As the hours dragged on, I found myself staring at my family across the room. Victoria's expression was one of pure disdain, her arms crossed over her chest, as if she could will the outcome in her favor. My mother sat with her head slightly tilted, her eyes flickering between the judge and me. But there was no warmth there, no love, just a coldness that had always been present, a coldness I could never ignore. Kenneth looked exhausted, his eyes sunken, as though the pressure of the entire situation was finally taking its toll. But none of them showed any remorse, any acknowledgement of the years of cruelty they had inflicted on me. And then there was Grandma Dorothy. She was there beside me, fragile, but still a force to be reckoned with. Her presence in the room was undeniable. She had built an empire with her own hands, and now she was ensuring that the person who had earned it, the one who had worked and struggled despite the odds, would carry on her legacy. As the judge listened to both sides, I felt a sense of calm wash over me.
This wasn't about the money, the estate, or the power. This was about something much bigger, about finding justice, about being seen for who I truly was. When it was finally time for closing arguments, I stood. My legs were shaking, my heart racing, but I knew I had to do this. I had to speak, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been silenced, ignored, and mistreated. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm not here because of the money. I'm here because of what that money represents. It represents the years I spent working hard, building something from nothing, despite being told I wasn't enough. It represents the truth that I am worthy of being here, of having a future, of standing as an equal to everyone else in this room. I paused, looking directly at my family. For years, you've made me feel small. For years, you've ignored my achievements and belittled me. But I'm done hiding. I've worked for everything I have, and I deserve to stand here and say that I will not be treated like I don't matter anymore. There was a silence in the room as I let my words settle. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, was watching me carefully. She had seen countless cases like this before, but I could tell this one was different. I wasn't just defending an inheritance, I was defending my dignity. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. I have reviewed the evidence, and I have listened to both sides. Based on the documentation presented and the clear evidence of Mrs. Hayes's mental clarity at the time of the will's execution, I find in favor of the defendant. My heart stopped for a moment, and then the words registered. I had won. The will is to stand as it is. The inheritance will go to Rachel Hayes, as per the wishes of Mrs. Dorothy Hayes. I felt the weight of it settle over me. I was no longer just the outsider in my family. I was the one who had been given the chance to rise above, to prove that my worth was never in question. But as I looked over at my family, I knew this victory wasn't just mine. It was a victory for anyone who had ever been overlooked, for anyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. This wasn't about the money. It was about standing up for what was right. As I walked out of the courtroom, Grandma Dorothy by my side, I felt something shift within me. The fight was over, but the journey had just begun.
The days that followed the courtroom decision felt surreal. The battle had been long, and now that it was over, I was left with the remnants of a life I had spent so many years trying to outrun. The media coverage, though it had died down slightly, still lingered in the background, waiting for the next story. The public had made their judgments, and the opinion on me was split down the middle. Some hailed me as a hero, someone who had fought against the oppressive hold of a family that didn't understand her. Others continued to label me a gold digger, a woman who had manipulated a dying elderly woman for a fortune. But none of that mattered anymore. I had done what I had to do to protect my future. I had stood up for myself, something I never thought I would have the strength to do. But the aftermath of the battle wasn't just about the media or public opinion. It was about what came next, the rebuilding. The legacy that Grandma Dorothy had left me was more than money. It was more than the vast estate, the properties, the companies. It was a call to action, a challenge to carry on her work and make something meaningful out of it. I spent the following weeks focusing on what I could do with the resources now at my disposal. The trust, the foundation of the companies, and the wealth were all part of a new chapter in my life. But it wasn't going to be easy. I had to learn how to run multi-billion-dollar businesses, how to manage investments, how to navigate a world that had never felt like mine. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let my family's bitterness or their attempts to tear me down define me. I was going to honor Grandma Dorothy's legacy.
I would use the wealth she had passed on to me, not to drown in luxury, but to make a difference in the lives of others. I founded the Dorothy Hayes Foundation for Adopted Children. It was a cause close to my heart, one that spoke to the pain I had experienced growing up and the pain that countless others were still enduring. The foundation would focus on providing legal support, educational opportunities, and safe housing for children who, like me, had been neglected or abused by the systems that were supposed to protect them. But it wasn't just the foundation that I focused on. I also began meeting with the management teams of the companies Grandma Dorothy had built. I wanted to learn the ins and outs of each business, to understand what had made them successful, and to build on that success in a way that felt authentic to me. It wasn't just about profit. It was about creating something lasting, something that could have a positive impact on the world. As the months passed, my family continued to try and undermine me. The rumors persisted. Victoria even tried to write a book, but it was quickly rejected by every publisher she approached. Kenneth struggled with the financial fallout of the court case, and Patricia found herself living in a small apartment after the sale of their assets. Their world had crumbled, but mine was just beginning to take shape. Despite the chaos and the noise from my family, I had finally found peace. I wasn't just Rachel, the adopted child, anymore. I was Rachel Hayes, the woman who had fought for her place in the world, who had stood her ground and made something of herself. And now I was building something that would last, something that could help others who had been through what I had. But there was one thing I couldn't shake: the emptiness of losing Grandma Dorothy. She was gone, and even though I had inherited her empire, it felt like the true loss was not the wealth, but the love and guidance she had always given me. The world had taken her from me too soon, and the grief was something I wasn't sure how to process. Still, I pressed on. I honored her memory by keeping her values alive: honesty, hard work, and kindness. And every day, I worked to make sure that the legacy she had left me would be used for something good.
The months that followed Grandma Dorothy's passing were a blur of transition and growth. The world had changed in ways I hadn't anticipated, and I found myself navigating unfamiliar territory, both personally and professionally. The weight of managing the legacy she left behind was immense, but it was also empowering. The Dorothy Hayes Foundation had started to take off, gaining traction and support from the community and organizations that shared its mission to protect adopted children and ensure they had access to resources they needed to thrive. I'd never imagined being in charge of something this big, but with each milestone, I felt more capable. I started attending board meetings for the companies Grandma Dorothy had built, absorbing as much as I could about their operations. The pharmaceutical empire, the real estate ventures, the technology investments. There was so much to learn, and at times, I felt completely overwhelmed. But as I sat in those meetings, making decisions, directing strategies, and seeing things come together, I realized I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Every now and then, I'd receive another email or text from my family, the same ones who had tried to tear me down during the court battle. Victoria had launched another attack, this time spreading rumors about the foundation, claiming it was a cash grab in the name of charity. She even went as far as to say that I had orchestrated the entire family's downfall to get my hands on their inheritance. But each attack only fueled my resolve. I had learned a long time ago that no matter how hard I'd tried to please them, it would never be enough. So I stopped trying. The foundation was thriving, my business was growing, and I was finally able to give back to the world in a way I had always dreamed of. Every success I had felt like a victory, not just for me, but for everyone who had been part of my journey. But then, one unexpected thing happened. My brother Kenneth reached out. It wasn't a call for money or help, it was an apology. The text was short, but the words hit harder than I had expected. "Rachel, I've been thinking a lot lately. I never realized how much I took you for granted,
how much I hurt you. I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I just wanted you to know." I stared at the message for a long time. For years, Kenneth had been one of the biggest contributors to my pain, dismissing my struggles and adding to my sense of being less than. But here he was acknowledging his role in it. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough to make me pause. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe, like I could release the resentment that had built up over the years. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive him completely, but I knew that I didn't want to carry the anger with me anymore. I wrote back, keeping it simple but genuine. "Thank you, Kenneth. It means more than you know." That was the last message we exchanged. There was no sudden reconciliation, no fairy tale ending, but it was a step towards healing, a step that I hadn't expected, but was grateful for. As the year came to a close, I found myself sitting in Grandma Dorothy's study, the place where so much of my life had changed. The legacy she had left me wasn't just the wealth, the companies, or the foundation. It was the lessons she had imparted: to be kind, to work hard, and most importantly, to stand up for myself. In the quiet of the room, with the weight of everything behind me, I made a promise to myself. I would continue building, continue growing, not for my family, not for anyone else, but for me, for the woman who had finally found her place in the world.
As the years passed, I found myself looking at the world with a different perspective. The battles I had fought, the losses I had endured, and the triumphs I had achieved had all shaped me into someone I barely recognized, but in the best way possible. I was no longer the quiet, unsure woman who had struggled to find her place in the family. I was Rachel Hayes, a leader, a businesswoman, and someone who had finally built a life on her own terms. The Dorothy Hayes Foundation had become a force in its own right. We had expanded our outreach to include legal aid programs for children in the foster system, education grants for young adults who had aged out of care, and mental health services for those affected by adoption trauma. The foundation's growth had surpassed my expectations, and the impact it was making was felt far and wide. But there was still so much more to do. The work was endless, and I couldn't help but throw myself into it with everything I had. I knew that every dollar raised, every program developed could change a life. My business, too, was thriving. The graphic design company I had started years ago had grown into a full-fledged creative agency. I had expanded into new markets, brought on incredible talent, and developed partnerships with international clients. There were days when I would sit back and take it all in, how far I had come, how much I had achieved, and it would almost overwhelm me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was living the life I had once only dreamed of. And then there was my personal life. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to open up to the possibility of something more. I had kept myself so closed off for so long, burying my emotions under layers of ambition and survival. But slowly, I allowed myself to reconnect with the parts of me that I had shut down for so long. I started dating again, not out of loneliness or a desire for validation, but because I had learned to love myself first. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I was looking for someone to share my life with. It wasn't easy, though. I had spent so many years being defined by the expectations of others, by the trauma of my past, that even now I found myself struggling to balance my work, my personal growth, and the relationships I was building. But with each step, I grew stronger, more confident in who I was and what I wanted from life. As I stood in front of the foundation's new office, watching the young children we had helped walk through the doors for the first time, I couldn't help but smile. This was what it had all been for. This was the legacy I was building, not just in the financial sense, but in the hearts of the people I was helping. I had turned my pain into something meaningful, something that would last far beyond my own lifetime. The legal battles were behind me now. My family had accepted the outcome, albeit reluctantly, and we had all moved on. My relationship with Kenneth remained distant but cordial. There was no animosity, just an understanding that some things couldn't be repaired, and that was okay. As for Victoria, she had disappeared from the public eye, her influence and power no longer the driving force it once was. I still think of Grandma Dorothy often. There were moments when I would find myself walking into her study or sitting by the window where she used to read, and I could almost feel her presence beside me. The lessons she had taught me were still with me, guiding me through every challenge, every decision. And I knew, deep down, that she would always be a part of the work I was doing, the woman who believed in me when no one else did. As the sun set on another day of work, I leaned back in my chair, taking in the view of the city skyline from my office. I was at peace. The fight was over, but the journey wasn't. It had just begun.